You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1. Welcome to Missed Apex Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Reddy, but my friends call me Spanners, so let's be friends. Welcome to our Belgian Grand Prix race review, where a tense battle for the lead was turned upside down by a Hail Mary in the fourth quarter. So coming up, we'll discuss, was that one of the most dramatic and genius wins in modern F1 from Mr. Russell? And what will Hamilton be thinking as he heads off for the summer break? Now, we are aware at the time of recording that there is a possible disqualification for George Russell for his car being underweight. And so because we didn't want to delay the show indefinitely, it's looking like that disqualification will come in. But our plan is to talk about the race as it happened without the disqualification and then discuss the potential disqualification later. Because even if that disqualification had come in before we started recording, I still wanted to talk about the drama as it unfolded and that call to risk the one stop. We are an independent podcast produced with the kind support of our patrons and partners. We aim to bring you a race review before your Monday morning commute. We might be wrong, but we're first. And yes, I know, sometimes we're wrong about being first. I'm not changing my tagline just because it isn't true. Well, it's good for a tyre-heavy show. We are joined by Matt Trumpets. Hello, Matthew.
Clean air is king. That's exactly what Oscar Piastri said, and he was right.
He's like Vinnie Jones in Gone in 60 Seconds, silent most of the time, and then just at the end of the movie comes out with something poignant like, clean air is king, and the rest of the grid just pulls over and goes, clean air is king. Good point, Mr. Piastri.
Yeah, well, I think as we get through the race, his point will be proved quite adequately.
And I'm joined by Alex Jeansy Vangeen. Hello, Alex.
Good evening. I'm happy because my two favourite drivers came 1-2, but then I realised I'm on a Hamilton heavy podcast and Hamilton didn't win, so the other people in the podcast aren't happy.
Okay, so I'm going to be completely honest that I was gutted, absolutely gutted for Hamilton to lose it in that fashion when he'd performed so well and the package had come together and it looked like a good, clean, earned victory. I was unable to appreciate the great tyre call by George Russell, which you were enjoying so much because you're a big George Russell fan as well. So that fandom completely tarred the end of the race. And all I could think was, that is gutting. But in sport, I think it's okay for that. If your athlete or team loses, has it snatched away at the end, it actually hurts. And that just means you care. But what's worse is that you were so giddy and happy about Russell winning with that strategy. So yeah, worst case scenario for me.
So I'd had an educated wish that Lewis was going to win this race, based on the fact that maybe if it was a little bit colder, the Merc might have done well. And it went better than I could ever possibly have imagined, because by lap 3 or 4, he'd taken the lead. And then all of a sudden, George Russell, who was condemned to somewhere between 5th and 7th, was all of a sudden in contention for the win, or at least a podium, because we just thought that Lewis would blow past him. But no, it was brilliant. I was so excited, and I clapped and I cheered as both of my favourite drivers went past the line. But I don't know if I'll be happy by the end of this show.
Well, let's see. We're also joined from Denmark by Kristian Pederson. Hello, Kristian. You're more neutral in this fight, I think.
I'm definitely a Hamilton fan because I'm a fan of great drivers. But I'm not. I'm happy today. We got a great race. I mean, it was great from the beginning to the end, and with a surprise ending. So, I mean, from a Formula One perspective, great day.
Did Formula One win today, Kristian? Because there was genuinely...
I'd say so, Spanners.
There was 5 drivers who could have won today. And even like going into the final pit stops, we just didn't know which way it was going to go. And then the person who crossed the line first wasn't on anyone's radar for a potential win.
Yeah, but not only that, it was everyone drove a race today. It was not freak accident. It wasn't like unfair rulings. It was proper racing from a proper racing perspective. And with a surprise Mercedes car, I think it was a great surprise for Formula One in general.
Well, of course, we are going to argue about who's got the fastest car because that's been the ongoing argument. And obviously, Matt, it's Mercedes because Mercedes won too. Obviously, the fastest car, to use your own logic against you.
Well, I think you used that logic as well when it suited you.
I can't remember which way round I was arguing it.
But I would agree with you. Overall, in the race today, it did look like Mercedes had the fastest car, except for those few laps where Oscar Piastri was being asked to use all his tires and had clean air. I think we weren't ever going to see the fastest car. I think the fastest car in traffic and the fastest car in clean air might not have been the same thing today. And that's part of what makes this race so interesting. But you know who did think McLaren had the fastest car?
McLaren fans?
Before the race, Lewis Hamilton did when he was talking about Max's pace. He said, oh, he might even be as fast as the McLarens. So it's an object of some debate still. I think we can keep this going for a while.
No. Look, and it's a complete surprise to be talking to you guys here and it being a straight battle between Russell and Hamilton for the win, and that being the point of discussion. I don't think anybody really had that on their radar. So I think, let's get into this because Lewis Hamilton was pretty much in control of that race. I had a little bit of a wobble when I thought, is he really going to be able to get ahead and stay ahead of Leclerc, especially around the pit stops, especially around the undercuts. And that didn't turn out to be the key focus of the battle as the Ferraris sort of faded towards the end of each stint. So what is clear with these stints is Hamilton was great on the tyres today. Mercedes was great on the tyres today. So that 1.3 second gap, 1.4 second gap between Leclerc and Hamilton was steady. But Hamilton was setting metronomic lap times. And then you could see the Ferrari fade away, which then was like, okay, well, we've got to go for the undercut now because we're going to be losing a lot of pace. So at least, Alex, we can say Mercedes was faster than Ferrari in that battle.
We had multiple championship winning Lewis Hamilton today, didn't we? We had a Lewis Hamilton who had his spring back in his step after his win and his podium in the last couple of races. But to be fair, I think what put him in that position was the way he dealt with Perez on lap one on the run up to Leclerc, when he got up the inside, got a great start, got up the inside of Perez into turn one. Perez was incredibly aggressive, swiping across him.
It was great.
But Lewis actually had to move out of the way and then came back to his line. And then they were side by side just before Eau Rouge. And I think Perez went, okay, I don't want another collision, and managed to let Lewis go through, which is a kind of ballsy move from Lewis that we haven't seen recently from Lewis, because he seemed to have been a little bit adverse to getting in a proper fight, and he actually went for it and got the great run up to turn one, nearly got Leclerc, but then managed to get it a couple of laps later.
If you watch the times during qualifying, Verstappen was just, he was in his own league in Sector 2, which is the downforce league at Spa. And I think he was 1.2 seconds faster than the entire grid, just going through Sector 2. And if you watch the race today, you would find as soon as the race more or less settled 3, 4, 5 laps in, you could see Hamilton doing 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 faster Sector 2 times than the entire field. And normally we see sort of a tendency for a DRS train at Spa, which was confirmed in the sector times for everyone behind him. They were faster than Hamilton in Sector 1 because of the DRS, but everywhere else he just outpaced them in a Mercedes running first. I think that tells us something about what's in the Mercedes in these conditions, I have to add.
So at Silverstone, Jeremy Clarkson referenced the old foxes, and I would wager that for whatever reason, Lewis had a very good sense that his race was over if he let Perez get ahead of him. And so he was absolutely willing to take it to the mat, as it were, to make sure he stayed in front. And that wound up being a very good decision. The Sector 2 times were very interesting. That's all been newly resurfaced and, according to Pirelli, provided more grip than we have seen previously. So I'm not surprised, given the fact that he was running in clean air from lap 3, that he was able to maintain good lap times there, because he would have been suffering less degradation because he had the full amount of his downforce throughout the entirety of the lap, whereas everybody else who was following in whatever DRS train they were in was going to be suffering with not having as much downforce, therefore not able to use the maximum available grip of the surface.
Okay, wait, does all of that mean less grip or more grip? So sorry, more wear or less wear? So if there's more grip, doesn't it attack the tire more? So you should get more wear.
Okay, so now we're going to have to discuss the difference between
Oh my
wear
God, what
and
did you do, Spence?
degradation.
This is my fault. Okay, but briefly.
So essentially, sliding the surface of the tire isn't good. The medium tire wasn't as good as the hard tire today. So with maximum downforce, what you do have is less sliding, but what you will get is more thermal degradation. So you have to manage your tire temperatures more carefully, but you will have more grip available. Whereas with less downforce, the car slides more, you do more damage to the surface of the tire, but you don't have as much overall grip. Therefore, you lose lap time wherever that sector is. Okay. Is my rough explanation, because I know from talking to experts, they are still explaining things to me.
Okay, I didn't figure out what that meant then in the end.
Hamilton had more grip, but he had to be careful about the temperature of his tires. The people in DRS trains lost more tread off their tire because they're sliding around more. They have less downforce.
That was super informative, but I do want to give Alex the opportunity to come in first and be happy, because we're acting as if there's no DQ coming, even though I think there is. But Hamilton was in control of this race, got clear of Leclerc, fended off the threat of the undercut. I agreed at the time with the Mercedes decision to cover off that undercut. I don't think anyone was screaming at Mercedes for doing that. In fact, we would have been very, very angry, because there's a lot of Mercedes and Hamilton fans in our group. We would have been angry, as we have been in the past, if they had let that drift on and allowed an undercut at a circuit where, you know, it looked like it was possible to defend more so than on previous occasions at Spa. So the race was over. Hamilton was bringing it home. All he had to do was, you know, maybe if a Sainz stays out for a one-stop, just cruise past those idiots on the one-stop. And then, Alex, there was the fluky Hail Mary from George Russell that ruined everything. Talk us through how your man pulled off an amazing and unexpected victory.
Well, we've always talked on this show about how George likes to play the alternate strategy. And today, it made sense to play the alternate strategy. Before, he's just thrown it out there and gone, I just want to do something different because it's not going the way I want. And I understand why people get frustrated with that. However, it was a case of, right, well, the calculations show that if I pit, I'm going to finish fifth. And if I don't pit, I'm going to finish fifth. So why bother pitting? So I think that's where they went, which is a case of, okay, I'll just stay out. My tyres will drop off. Lewis will come past me quite easy. Piastri will come past me quite easy. And then maybe I can hang on for my podium. If not, I'll drop back to where I was kind of destined to be. Because during the race, we've been talking about the fact there was 8 cars involved in this race, and maybe 5 of them had a chance of winning. I didn't have Russell in that group of cars that was going to win. It was Russell and Sainz, and of course Perez, who weren't going to win the race today. And then all of a sudden, George is in contention and actually holds on. And listen, we've given him a lot of stick for not being able to manage the tyres in the past.
Yep.
And he made it work today. He did the right thing with the tyres. He drove brilliantly. He didn't make any mistakes. I mean, it frustrated me as a Hamilton fan that when Lewis was right behind George, he missed turn 1 4 laps in a row, which then gave George the better exit from turn 1, which helped keep him ahead into Leclerc.
Okay, so you're getting defensive as if I'm going to say George Russell didn't deserve that victory, right? So we'll talk about the battle with Hamilton. On the point of us giving him a bit of grief for always going for the alternate strategy, there have been so many times where he's done the goal hanging on the hards, and it's tended to be not I can do a miracle and make these tyres last. It's been more of if a safety car comes out, I will get a free pit stop and that will get me up there. So, I mean, it could have been a genius read, or it could have been one of those things where he goes for that kind of alternate, hey, why not strategy enough? And this time it worked. So I'm not trying to detract from it. I'm just saying he likes a gamble. If you were to base your world championship push on those gambles, I think overall you lose. But if you're investing in this kind of, I'm not in a title fight, so why not keep investing in these lower percentage strategies? And then when I get a win, it's marvelous. I can't really argue with that. And it's worked today.
If I was playing F1 24, it's the strategy I would have done if I was in that position. So it made sense to go for it because his race wasn't getting any better. And he put himself from not even in contention for a podium to contention and the eventual win. So, you know, it worked for him today. But the difference between it working for him today and not working in the past was he managed the tyres very well on a track where tyre management was difficult, which means he's learning and he's getting better, especially because we compare him to his teammate. And unfortunately for him, his teammate happens to be the greatest driver of all time and also the best tyre manager of all time. And he did a great job and fended him off. So yeah. I don't want to take anything away from this win, even if he does come in underweight. And there's some statistics that I've seen floating around my phone that says it's probably worth 2-3 seconds across the whole course of the race, which obviously would put him there. Matt's shaking his head, but it's the text message I got a minute ago and I read very briefly, so that's what I'm basing it on.
Yeah, you don't want to take anything away from him. I'm not making that claim. No. All I'm saying is, okay, so there's two scenarios here. Either, you know, he really got that feel and he had this genius moment where he went, these tyres are going to last, everyone else has read it wrong, which if he did, that's amazing. The less generous interpretation is he takes these kind of low percentage gambles all the time, and why not? I actually think it's the former, Matt. That's the feeling that I got, that he's just read this situation and everybody else has maybe been a bit slavish to the strategy, because ultimately Lewis Hamilton's pit crew did not give him the best strategy today, and George Russell from the car chose the best strategy.
Well, I would say, first of all, only with an extremely large dollop of hindsight would you say that a one-stop strategy was the best strategy. I would also say a couple of things worked very much in Russell's favor. First of all, I think he was running slightly more heavy on the downforce than Lewis was based on the qualifying results in the wet. His Sector 2s were generally faster, but slower in Sector 1 and 3. So I think he had a little extra downforce to help him out with the tire wear. Secondly, you had a pretty green track after all of the rain. So you had a massive amount of track evolution. And on a new surface, that can be a very unpredictable thing. The tires lasted longer than anyone expected them to. And the two-stop was very clearly the preferred strategy if you look at the entire rest of the field, except for, I think, Russell, Alonso, and Stroll. And the last thing that also aided him is once he committed to that one stop, because even Lewis said, no, my tires are fine, man. My tires are fine, man. You know, I can keep on going.
In both stints, he said that.
Yeah. They weren't having any trouble with him. But once he was in clean air, this again was a huge benefit to him being able to correctly manage those tires. But it didn't work out for everybody. I'll briefly reference Alonso and Stroll. Both ran one stops. Alonso finished in 9th. Stroll got passed by a bunch of people on 2 stops and finished 12th. So it wasn't a nailed-on victory, which goes to Alex's point that it was also some very good driving by Russell that saw him cross the line in first place.
Based on Hamilton's reaction to it, I'd say maybe he don't feel about it like you do, Matt. He word for word, he said, you have to trust the people you work with. I put my faith in my strategists. I should be able to rely on them. Did I know I was in danger of being stuffed by my teammate? I was never told that.
Did he say that?
To
Did
George.
he say that?
Yeah.
Stuffed by my teammate?
Apparently he said that to Viaplay.
There is no way Mercedes expected George to be near the podium, let alone winning that race. Apparently, though, someone has said in Mia has said in our live chat that apparently they discussed it, and Lewis discussed it in the morning meeting, saying that he wanted it, and everyone told him no. But it's one of those things of it was never the plan to do a one stop. It was something that George went, these tyres feel fine. Can I just stay on them? And they said yes.
One thing that struck my mind, though, because I was looking at it purely through a Hamilton fan lens, and why is this desperately unfair? So my gut instinct was, this is desperately unfair. What can I use to justify that? And what springs to mind is Mercedes have always been reluctant to just give one driver a different strategy. There's always been like a fairness issue, especially around Nico and Lewis, Hamilton, Rosberg. They would be very, very reluctant to ever put them on a different strategy. And wasn't it Singapore last year where Russell would have been incredibly or said he would have been very unhappy if they'd have split the strategies when they were hunting down Sainz and Norris. So I think Hamilton can feel aggrieved to go, I was looking at that strategy, everyone said no, I had lots of tyre life left, and I followed the strategy the team told me, and then my teammate gets given the race-winning strategy ahead of me, and at no point am I told that. And all throughout the radio messages with Bono, they're talking about the threat to Piastri. So I can see why he was a bit shell-shocked when they got to the podium. Where did that come from? Small one from Alex then, Matt.
Lewis looked like the kid who'd had his ice cream eaten by a seagull. He was just like, oh yeah, I've got my ice cream. Who took my ice cream?
That is heartbreaking.
It was properly heartbreaking. It's a case of, I don't understand how I lost that when I was in such control. But that's the whole thing. I genuinely believe it was a case of, well, we can stick Russell on this, it's fine. And that's what happened.
Well, indeed, I will confirm that for you because I happen to have a transcript of some of the radio conversation, and they start out telling him they need him to use up the tires because they're facing the undercut to Norris and Perez. And his actual reply at that point is like making sure these tires won't go to the end. So he was definitely thinking the tires will go to the end at that point, and that's what he'd like to do. But then about 5 or 6 minutes later, they're like, Norris is in the pits. You've got Lewis 8 seconds behind. And then they go, George, just confirming you're happy to stay out. This was not a decision that was made ahead of time. And in the normal course of Mercedes engineering, I would be happy to stress, if they thought it was a 50-50 strategy, they would have offered it to Lewis first. Said, your lead driver, we see these finishing roughly the same place. Which one do you want? And Lewis would have been given his choice. But they clearly, along with everybody else at the front, thought the two-stop was going to work. Except for, I'm just going to say the name, talk about it later, Carlos Sainz did want to run a one-stop.
And where did he finish?
Yeah.
If you'd like to know, he finished 7th. But that's because he started on the hard tire and was forced to use the medium, which was never going to work because it was the worst tire. If he'd started on the medium tire
he did
gone
pit
to the
again.
hard tire, it might have worked. Yeah,
he did pit again.
I think Lewis has means to be annoyed if other people had done a one-stop and gained 5 positions. But that's the whole thing, is no one else thought it was going to work. No one else did it. They thought, sod it, we might as well try. And that's why.
No one expects the Spanish Inquisition. That's literally my response here. No one expected this strategy to work. It was a wild combination of things that let it play out the way it did.
It's actually worse than that, because even after Russell had decided to stay out and they said to him, are you sure? He's like, yeah, I know, 100% of that. Because the 3 cars behind have this, that, and the other, Russell was incredibly clear. No, I'm fine. We're doing this. Even after that, they were still talking to Hamilton as if Piastri was the threat. And the message when it came to overtaking Russell, they didn't think for a second they would need team orders. They thought he was going to cruise past, and they said, but just be careful when you do it. So they thought he was going to cruise past, and then the fight would be Russell versus Piastri. So when they caught up and it wasn't happening straight away, that is the point for me. I know it worked out in the end and Piastri didn't catch them, but that's the point for me where Mercedes need to be decisive and go, okay, Piastri is coming through quick and he is a genuine threat. He's got pace. So if you two fight, you might end up losing the win, or we'd end up losing the 1-2. Our best chance of a 1-2 here is let Hamilton pass, sit in the DRS. So at that point, Alex, I was pretty angry, or was it my fan bias saying how I want the swap to be manufactured? What reasoning can I put for that?
I said this in our chat when it happened. I'm like, right, Lewis will come, he'll cruise past. If not, they'll probably just say, George, we've got a threat from behind. It's either lose a 1-2 or we get a 1-3 or worse. So just let Lewis through.
And that time was coming down quickly.
That's exactly what I expected to happen. But then I think once he got to George, and I mean, because we heard them tell Lewis to do fuel saving. We never heard them tell George to do fuel saving or anything else other than just look after the tyres. And once Lewis had got behind George and they weren't going that slowly and Oscar wasn't catching as quickly because obviously his tyre had started to age, so his lap time delta to them had dropped. And I think it was a case of, well, if Oscar does catch us now as well, he's not going to pass us. If Lewis can't pass George with no DRS, Oscar's not going to pass us either.
Yep, and they had the exact same power unit to be fighting with. So it was not a case of, oh, it's a Honda that's faster at different points in the track or, a Ferrari or something like that. They knew that Piastri had a hopeless task ahead of him. So I went to the UK a couple of weeks ago, and you guys really love the gambling commercials. Mercedes was like a win two ways ticket. They saw that data and they were just like, it really doesn't matter as long as we don't crash each other. We're winning regardless.
But Mercedes have generally not split the strategies like that. Or when they have, I mean, this isn't a million miles away from Norris getting the undercut on Piastri and them saying, okay, well, we obviously didn't mean to give you that advantageous strategy. Go back to the order as it was. So it's not a million miles away from that. Mercedes are normally very reluctant to give one driver a significantly better strategy and that dictate the finishing order. They've swapped those around before. Kristian, sorry. Oh, go on, Matt.
Well, we have some news in a minute, but go ahead.
Oh, okay. Kristian.
I just noticed a thing. As soon as Hamilton was leading the race, he felt something down his leg.
Excellent. And do you have any news on what that was?
No, that's it. That's all.
Okay. And
there was something loose down by his legs that made him anxious. Yeah.
Just from a production point of view, I'm going to argue that might not supersede any breaking news that the panel might have to offer. What have we heard, guys?
Well, we've seen the document posted on Twitter, and George Russell has no longer won the Belgian Grand Prix. Hamilton wins.
F1. F1 sucks.
Piastri is second. And
F1's so great.
Third.
Yay, I'm happy now. Oh, I am so genuinely sorry to Russell fans, and that includes you, Alex, because you were so happy, and it's such a great story and such a dramatic Hail Mary that won the race from probably being... Yeah, he probably would have got beaten by Verstappen had he not pitted.
However...
Had he not stayed out.
Yay, Lewis Hamilton won!
Yay! So we're okay again. So there's a shame for that. And I don't know who it was. I think it's in our group chat now as well, that someone had posted that there is maybe a significant advantage from being underweight. But Matt, are you able to piece together anything here as to how they ended up underweight and how they've been caught doing it? What's your take? What's your reaction?
My reaction is there's a couple of different ways this could have occurred. One is they used more fuel than they anticipated because they didn't expect they expected Russell to be running in traffic in a DRS train probably. So they might have used more fuel. So they might have miscalculated their fuel slightly. But I think the big one too is they might not have expected to have lost as much mass off of the tire tread as they wound up. In other words, their calculations, and again, this supports my point that this is really a snap decision for Mercedes. We have nothing to lose and everything to gain. So yeah, let's roll those dice. But they would not have calculated necessarily how much pickup he needed on those tires to make the car meet minimum weight. And if he didn't do a good job picking up marbles on the way in, which I didn't witness his in lap, so I don't know that, then yeah, that could potentially be a real problem in terms of being underweight.
Oh, sorry.
We should not forget there's no in-lap in Spa. We forgot about that.
Well, see, there you go. No pickup.
Yeah. Has that always been like that? Because I had no idea.
Well, it has to do with how long it takes for the cars to go around again. It's gonna be 3, 4, 5 minutes.
How have I missed that every year
they just go around the corner?
How have I missed that? They do turn one and then go backwards into the pits.
Yeah.
Well, they literally go to La Source, go really wide, come round, turn around, and go up the really narrow pit lane.
I had absolutely
that makes it even more plausible that the tire weight loss was not something they anticipated in their engineering
but that would
calculations.
Come for all the cars, right, Matt? I mean, that would, and they are talking about the top 10 is being weighed now, and there could be more penalties, but let's hold that horse for now. I would say if the new track here didn't give them, and the weather condition didn't give them any sort of real-time racing strategy. What is the consumption of fuel, tires, etc.? They sort of went half blind into the race from that point of view. That could be the reason.
They would have had no usable tire data because it was much cooler before this. So the exact extent of the wear, you're correct. They would try and model it based on what they had, but what they had was 10C at least cooler, if not 20. Than what we saw today. And the reason why I think you'll find anyone who ran a two-stop will be at the correct weight is because that would have been the calculation and that was a preferred strategy. People who ran a one-stop, potentially, if they didn't plan for it, could be at risk for also being underweight.
Okay, stupid question, Matt, and then I've got another point to make.
No question is stupid, just the people who ask it. What? No, I didn't say anything.
So... A tire where you've used up all the tire life. I mean, I've heard myself ask it in my head now, and it's stupid.
Okay, no, it's not.
That's significantly lighter than a new tire that you put on. So if you were really panicking and you had a 25-second lead, could you go, "Oh, let's just put new tires on. It doesn't matter if they're scrub, but that will help us with the weight."
Yes, absolutely, you could.
And how much can you pick up on the tires on a normal lap where you do pick up? Could you bring it back up to a new tire weight? And that's why they do that, because that's the more consistent measurement that they would use.
They want to give themselves the biggest margin possible because they always try and calculate it as to the finest, to the thousandth. They try to calculate these sorts of things. And then the pickup gives them a little bit of an out if their maths weren't entirely correct. And yes, I said it the British way just to humor you people.
So 1.5 kilograms, we think there is some performance advantage spread over the whole of the race. It's obviously not going to be tons.
It's like 0.0, what are we saying? 0.03 to 0.045 per lap.
But the thing is, it's over the course of the race. He wasn't underweight for the whole race.
That's the other
thing.
point.
It's the case of he was underweight for 11 laps.
For the last bit, where he decided to stay out.
It doesn't really count as that. But the thing is however I can sit here and, as a George fan and gutted for George because George did a great job today, because the being underweight thing is not his fault.
No, of course not.
We can't acclaim any blame to him. The team, apparently Red Bull had done some tests on this during practice and they noticed that there was quite a lot of wear off the tires and the reduction of weight from the tires because of this. So obviously maybe that is fully on Mercedes for not thinking about it or not getting George to save more fuel. I mean, we don't know. They might have told George to save fuel. He went, "I've got plenty of fuel. I'm going to keep going fast."
Hamilton had to save fuel in the first stint.
Hamilton definitely had to save fuel. But obviously we've had lots of safety cars here as well. So it's gutting for George, but as I've said with a lot of these situations in the past, like with Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc back in, was it Saudi last year, where they got disqualified because they're planks. The rules is the rules, and that's what has to happen.
I think it was COTA, before we get any emails.
COTA, yes, sorry, you're right, COTA.
I'm so glad you mentioned safety cars because I always look at the strategy briefs before the race. 88% of the races up until this year have had a safety car in them. So again, all these little things come together, and if you're just a tiny bit off on one of them, you could wind up with a result like we saw today for Russell, where I don't think the team intentionally tried to run him light.
No, of course not.
But it winds up working out very much to your disadvantage.
Okay, so we'll end the Mercedes bit, just now, but. Amazing that with not the optimum strategy call in the end for Lewis Hamilton and George Russell starting quite far back on the grid, they still ended up on track with a 1-2. And even regardless if he'd managed to pick up some tires or had a bit of extra fuel, he was probably going to end up on the podium. A double podium was more than on. This represents a massive, massive step forward for Mercedes, who across different conditions qualified reasonably well and also, had great race pace, have been fast for 2 races in a row, and then obviously the race before that were fast enough to pick up the win after the contact with the front runners. This is a significant step forward for Mercedes. They're getting something right. This isn't a fluke.
And for the Hamfosi fans, the stats, 105 wins now for Lewis Hamilton, which means it's 2 more wins that Max has to get to try and get closer to his record, which we don't want him getting. And it also means that Lewis is now, apart from Max, the only driver with more than 1 win.
Oh, that's true. That's true. And Lewis Hamilton was asked, are you in the championship? And he's emphatically saying no. It would be the most bizarre turnaround ever. But even in the championship battle that's realistic, Max Verstappen today managed to increase his championship lead. So I think, is that the next place to go? Should we go and talk about Red Bull? Yeah, I know we're skipping down the order a little bit, Matt, but there was a lot made of the fact that Verstappen had the penalty, and what I believe happened is they're basically trying to save up a new engine to go into the pool. I don't think they raced with that new engine.
Are we sure about that?
No, we're
because
not. I'm not sure.
didn't have access to the coverage, and the only other person who said they had seen it said that they did wind up with the new power unit again.
Okay. In any case, they needed an extra power unit. Spa's a logical place to take that. And so people were talking about, could Max Verstappen win? Now, he got nowhere near the victory, and that was without any kind of off, without any kind of contact, without any kind of damage. The pace just wasn't there to cruise up to the front in the way we've become accustomed. Now, I will say, I called this, if you look at my Twitter, there's proof. It was very similar to me to the Austrian qualifying performance, where they had a massive gap, 0.4 seconds out of the blue, and then that didn't translate to race pace because the tyre wear was not there in Austria. It was kind of ordinary. Today, there was nothing spectacular. They weren't out stinting everyone. I don't think Verstappen was looking to do a miracle one stop. They were out of place on the grid due to the penalty, and I don't think it's a given that if he was in pole position, he would have won today. Kristian.
As I talked about earlier, the Sector 2 time for Verstappen, where he pulled 1.2 seconds on the entire field, that is where he was lacking performance because he was in traffic. So I don't really get why they used that setup strategy from the Red Bull side of things. If they have set up their cars to be fast in the straight, they could probably make a difference in the DRS train. But something was a little bit off, and judging from... we're not going to talk about Perez yet. I know we're waiting.
Just give me a minute.
Don't
give
worry.
me a minute.
But from Verstappen says this is not about Perez not being good enough. This is about the car. And suddenly we see the team start talking different things. I love this. I'm very excited for the next couple of months from a Red Bull perspective.
Yeah, well, the next year and a half, Alex.
Yeah.
I feel like still the clean air is king thing. And I do believe that if Max was at the front of the grid, he probably would have disappeared off into the distance. However, I also find it very strange that knowing that Max was going to be in the middle of the pack, they didn't set the car up as low downforce for an overtaking type of car. I think part of the reason he was so good in qualifying yesterday was because he had way more downforce than everybody else and therefore was great in the middle sector.
But they wouldn't have had to have done this time last year. I think that's part of the problem, is they approached it with, well, we'll get them in the DRS. And whatever it was that there was their DRS advantage in the past seems to have gone now. Whatever that out-and-out pace advantage is has kind of gone now. But they didn't go for an alternate strategy, be like Ricciardo, make up a few places on the softs, then get off them, go run in clean air for a bit, and then, I don't know, maybe go for an overcut at the end. They tried to do it route one, and they were unable to do it. Now, in defense to the pit wall, they tried to go long in the last Grand Prix, and Max Verstappen did not like that strategy one little bit. So I don't know if their hands were tied a little bit by that, but it's still a good race car. It's just not the ultra dominant, making F1 look ridiculous like it has been for the couple of years. And it's almost a shame, Alex. I think if we get into championship maths now, it's all but over because I don't think Norris has got it in him this season. Imagine if this had all happened just a few races ago, even 4 or 5 races ago.
This season has 2009 vibes, where the Brawn came out the box, was the fastest car by a country mile, won the first 7 races, with Jensen winning 6 and Barrichello winning 1 of them, and then all of a sudden it stopped, and everybody else started to catch up. But they built up such a big lead in those first few races that it didn't matter what anybody else did. And I mean, as we saw today, that Max increased his lead on the only person that's got any chance of beating him, which is Lando. So yeah, the driver's title is out the window. I don't even want to think about the driver's title. All I want is more races like today, where from the start there were 7 drivers capable of winning this race and Sergio Perez.
And there was one moment where there was a McLaren overtaking a Ferrari. Stop it. There was a McLaren overtaking a Ferrari, and I didn't know which one it was because you had these 2 trains, didn't you? So you had a Piastri ahead, also fighting a Ferrari and a Mercedes. And it was just great to go, this is really mixed up. It's not like Noah's Ark. It's not 2x2. It was just fantastic racing, not only strategy-wise, but pace-wise. And I was enjoying it no matter who won, which is easy to say now I know that Hamilton won.
I'm just going to give a short quote again. This is from Helmut Marko. He said in these words, Sergio had an opportunity to achieve a good result from a second place.
He's out.
Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Especially in the last stint, he completely collapsed, driving 148 times. What looked so positive in qualifying, unfortunately, didn't come true in the race. I would say that is him being fired right there.
Well done for your last race, Perez.
That was his testimonial.
Can I just talk about the Red Bull race a little bit?
Let's do it.
Before we really narrow down on Perez?
Okay, good, because I have things to say. I have defense.
So first of all, as far as Red Bull was concerned, one of the reasons I don't think we saw them making a serious attempt to get much higher up the grid than they did was because they brought the wrong tires to this particular tire fight. They only had a single set of hards. The cars that did the best all went medium, hard. So right off the bat, they got that wrong. And you're right, they did run a higher level of downforce, probably because they figured overall Max starting 11th and being slightly slower was a better choice than having him start 15th and having to make more risky overtakes and a riskier start at the beginning of the race. But the thing nobody has mentioned yet is the fact that we also had a 75 meter shorter DRS zone. And this played into not only them not being able to make further overtakes, but why ultimately perhaps Hamilton was never able to get close enough to overtake Russell, even though I think he had easily a second delta on him in terms of lap time. So it made Spa, from a track that we always think of as being very easy to overtake, to being somewhat more difficult to overtake and giving a better chance to the people on the riskier strategies, namely Russell.
Okay, but Perez himself, in his own words, says that they pitted into traffic. Then, obviously, he got pitted out of... Shut up, Alex. Just let me have it. Pitted into traffic, and then, obviously, he got pitted out of the way of Verstappen, and that wasn't the optimum strategy at all. And there was this clipping down the straight. So his engine was maxing out down the straight. Verstappen's wasn't. I will now, and I've held my tongue all year. That's not the same car. They do not have the same car. They just don't.
Right.
Show me Verstappen's clipping. Show me Verstappen's clipping.
Take it for Tim Four hat.
Show me Verstappen's clipping, and I'll take off my tin hat.
First of all, pitting into traffic. Apart from Leclerc, every single one of the top 8 got pitted into traffic and stuck behind somebody when they came out the pit lane. All of them, except Leclerc. Leclerc is the only one that got a clean run out of the pits. What was your other point that was also wrong?
It's not the same car.
Huh? It's not the same car. So we're talking about clipping. Battery management has as much to do with the driver as it has to do with the team. And Spa, because it is a track that is mostly on throttle, battery management is incredibly important. So I would be happy to assume that one of the worst drivers on the grid is also not very good at managing his battery like everybody else. Because I don't know if you've played the F1 games, I have, and you've got to manage the battery, and it's a pain in the backside. And I just assume Perez is probably not good at that bit either.
I'd argue that Perez has been raced by Red Bull as the team as an assistant to Verstappen. He's never been raced as his own drive. That is what you see all the time. Especially today, his only task was basically just to hold up people to get Verstappen up front, right? So that is one thing, and that plays to your psychology a lot. But I want to get into something that is maybe a little bit technical, but everyone's been talking about why the Red Bull car is so much faster than everyone. And we all talk about clean air and stuff like that. But there is definitely some characteristic to the car and the way it works that is holding them back in certain in certain positions or in certain environments. And as we can see, and they talk about, they don't use the curbs. They want to not use the curbs, right? And from my understanding, it has to do with the how their suspension reacts to lateral G-forces. So that is when the car wants to go sideways, right? So when the car bounces in a lateral position, that hurts the suspension. That is why you need the drivers to drive around the curbs. A driver like Sergio Perez, you want him to completely change his driving style to become one with the car. And he's obviously not capable of that. I'm not saying he's a bad driver. He's a very competent driver. I've always liked him. He was the tire whisperer back in the day, remember? So, I mean, he's got the goods, but he hasn't got the goods to drive that car. And I think very, very few people can drive that car, actually. One of them being Ricciardo.
The speculation will go, I'm sure. Yeah. Okay, so as far as the speculation goes, the most journalistic information we have in our crew is that it's Lawson who will replace Perez at Red Bull. But Matt, you were going to continue on topic.
Yes, I was. I was going to say, actually, from a technical point of view, because I've been doing some reading, I think we are talking about combining on the curbs roll, warp, and heave.
That's what Kristian said.
That doesn't play well with the Red Bull basic ride height settings. But the F1 TV that I was listening to did make a very big deal about Max generally lifting slightly into Eau Rouge because they were running such very, very low ride heights that they had to be cautious about bottoming the car out. Now, I've not seen any throttle traces, so I can't confirm this, but they were fairly consistent in reporting it. And I would say if that's the case, then that goes to your curb point very much, that they were constrained more so than other cars with how they were able to drive it. If we're going to talk about Perez race in particular, well, Spanner's already made the most important point, which is they pitted him completely nonsensically to get him out of Max's way.
Maybe they just don't trust him to move out the way sufficiently enough, so they had to box him because he's that useless. I mean, when we talk about, again, going back to the whole thing about him not having the same car.
Hang on, you've gone Wait, stop. You've gone full Philpott there that's an emotive...
I have a text from him, to be honest.
You've used emotive language there, so I'm going to respond to that. All right, because you said you've just called him useless. So I'll just get my little piece out here. We will get the full story. He doesn't have the same car. He doesn't have the same backing of the team. The car is not designed towards him. He doesn't get the same tactics. He hasn't had the same emotional and moral support. This is not a fair shake of the stick that Sergio Perez has had at Red Bull, and people are being way, way, way too harsh on him.
I'm sorry. If they didn't want him to be, if they didn't want him in the team, why would they keep giving him contracts and then giving him more contracts? They want him to do well. It makes no sense to give him a vastly different car that is the reason that he's so far behind. The thing you have to look back at as well is like, for example, his time at McLaren. He was quickish, but always caused issues. He's been good in midfield cars because he does the odd thing. And I think he's managed to make the best of a bad situation and faked it until he made it and got himself into this really, really good position of being at a top team. But unfortunately, he's got there and can't fake it anymore. And Red Bull have always given the same car, except to Mark Webber at Silverstone in 2000.
Always, except when they don't.
Always except when they don't.
Which is
not 80% of the time. It works all the time, whatever. So yeah, I very much believe that it is very much that case that Perez is doomed.
I just want to say that we're also ignoring the fact here that Max might have had a brand new power unit and Perez was pedaling an old, worn out one. He'll likely get a new one in Monza, assuming they don't make any changes over the summer break, which, I mean, I don't know. Who knows what they're really going to do? But also, like you say, he was useless, but there he was letting Max through and holding up Norris after their pit stop. So it's not like Red Bull had no use for him. But I think the Red Bull strategists are, when he gets into that midfield position, immediately default to the let's just use him, let's sacrifice him to the greater good of the Max. And so he winds up with artificially distorted, poorer results than he would achieve if they just optimized his strategy. And we're finally seeing that being a problem for them because McLaren's only 43 points behind in the constructors now?
During qualifying, the top 14 cars was within a second, right? So they were all really close, yet Perez was almost 9/10 behind Verstappen and only 3 thousandths faster than a Williams to go into
That's
Q3.
Q2. That's Q2. That's not the final qualifying result, but whatever.
You and Q1 and numbers, I'm not going to go into details here. I'm just going to add this. When you are from Mexico, you can always convince people by showing them their food. It's fried bread with melted cheese and jalapenos and stuff like that. And when you see that, I don't know what you're talking about, racing and stuff.
Firstly, I can't say anything because I'm British, but also Denmark on very thin ground. Bacon and flat, tacky brown bread. No, you're not in this chat.
Did you badmouth bacon?
Not in badmouth it. I'm just saying you've got one thing.
Because no one badmouths bacon on my watch.
I would never dream of it. Alex? Oh, okay, cool. I think that's enough. And I'm sure that over the summer, we will speculate on who will be Daniel Ricciardo's replacement. But I think we can go on to Ferrari. Well, I suppose it's yes, Ferrari and McLaren really. We'll do Ferrari now because I need a break, and I know you love talking about Ferrari. And then we'll talk about Piastri, who I think had an absolutely stonking race today, but a little bit of a step forward. There was weaknesses clearly, Matt, but that Ferrari looked much better over the course of the weekend.
Well, they surprised themselves a bit, I think, with their performance, especially in qualifying. They'd been struggling with a car that they'd made faster, but again, had the bouncing issues, and that is mechanical suspension, ride height, a lot of different factors. And they had rolled back their updates and were much slower than the teams who had still their updates. And then they come to today's race with some minor improvements. And it seems like, at least for this track, they sort of found the formula to get them there or thereabouts.
I don't have anything to add. Alex?
I'll be honest, I was distracted by my phone.
Spanish
leaves us for 5 seconds and we fuck it up.
Okay, fine. You know what?
You have to do some directing, Matt. You have to, these idiots, they don't say anything unless you point at them.
I was going to, because I know space is not a consideration except on the live stream. I was just going to give a minute to see if anyone talked into it. But the most interesting thing we did see from Ferrari today, aside from Leclerc's finishing now, I guess, on the podium, is the fact that Sainz took it upon himself to engineer a one-stop from the beginning. And it did not work out for him.
Yeah, because he started on a different tyre to everybody else. I think everyone else started on the medium and he started on the hard, didn't he? So so that was their intention to go that way. But I've always seemed to find the harder tyre that everyone seems to start when people start never ever does the job. And again, that was proved today because Carlos was just ahead of Perez at the end. And it baffles me that people keep going for this. Oh, we'll just go really, really long when we're starting out of position. The problem you've got at the moment is because you've got 4 teams fighting for wins now, you've got to just go for your best strategy out the box and not try and go for the crazy strategy to start with. So go with whatever is going to be fastest out the blocks and get you. And once the shuffle is done after the first 5-10 laps, then you can figure out what you want to do with your strategy. So I just think everyone keeps trying to box clever, but ends up boxing stupid.
I think it talks to the strengths of Ferrari letting Sainz do his own race pace, do his own race, basically. I mean, if you have a team of 1,500 people and you still give the driver that responsibility and invite that into the team, I think that speaks volumes about how you operate in that team. And I don't think every team can how do you say it, embrace that. You see it with Hamilton and Bono in a certain way as well. Sainz and Hamilton's race strategies sort of, they do what they want to do more or less because they are not part of the team in 6 months' time. So it feels like they're just on their way out strategy-wise.
I really thought with Fred Vasseur coming into Ferrari, we'd see less of this dumb strategy stuff coming from Ferrari, which is why I wasn't that bothered and I was quite excited about Lewis going to Ferrari. I'm starting to worry about the Lewis going to Ferrari situation because Ferrari aren't being any less Ferrari at the moment. And I want Fred to sort that out because if he doesn't, it's going where Lewis's last move was genius. This might look less so.
Okay, so what are you complaining about strategy-wise here? Letting Sainz pick his own strategy?
I mean, to be fair, they seem to have left Sainz to his own devices since they kicked him out of the team. And to be fair, he's doing well. I actually think performance-wise, he's been better than Leclerc. But they just, every race, there seems to be... In absolute pace, I think he's been better than Leclerc the last quarter of the season. I absolutely believe it.
No.
Me too.
All right, so we've sucked Spanners back into this debate. Before I talk about tires, come on, take him down.
No, oh, come on. Like I was about to, I had the speakers up, so I was listening to you as I was wandering around. And I was thinking to myself, the last few races have really proved that they made the right decision in which driver they were hanging on to. I know Sainz had a few good results early on in the season, and that made him the most marketable driver that was available. But I don't see what you're seeing. I'm seeing it as it's now very clear that Leclerc is the better of the two drivers.
I think Leclerc is the faster driver, without a shadow of a doubt. I would put Leclerc in an argument as Leclerc is one of the fastest over a single lap drivers in the sport. Unfortunately, Leclerc's downfall isn't that Sainz is being amazing. It's that Leclerc's downfall is Leclerc isn't the most consistent driver out there, which is why I definitely feel, and it has nothing to do with the Hamfosi in me, I think he's going to get obliterated by Lewis. Because the one thing that Lewis has always been has been solid and consistent. I think Leclerc will have a similar record that George has against Lewis in qualifying. But I think when it comes to the race, I think Lewis's metronomic pace will just infuriate Charles Leclerc.
Yeah, it is kind of like a little tortoise and a little hare at Ferrari. But before I get back to Spanner's larger point about Lewis going there, I do want to say I kind of enjoy the fact that at least at Ferrari, you can sort of let each garage have a little bit of freedom. And yet we don't see the drivers sniping at each other about unfairness the way that we often, even, at Mercedes, clearly Lewis felt like he'd been hard done by in the strategy department. So maybe there will be some positives at Ferrari for Lewis as well.
I'm so pessimistic now. I'm so pessimistic because I've seen Mercedes have genuinely now sorted out whatever issue they've got. It's sorted. And I'm not saying that they're going to go on to have the best car, but they have a platform that they can work on. So at the beginning of the season, it was 2 years in a row, and there was no guarantee that after the third false start in a season that it was ever going to be fixed. But, you have to gamble as a driver, and I think this is going to turn out to be a terrible gamble. So his time at Ferrari is going to end up being a testimonial, a 3-year farewell tour with the odd bit of glory, the odd victory. That's fine as well. He's at the end of his career. But yeah, Ferrari definitely are going through something at the moment. If you thought Ferrari had it completely sorted, it's clear that they don't. Kristian?
The whole "I love you, Bono" at Silverstone, the entire vibe there. I'm pretty sure Bono's going to go with Lewis to Ferrari. He's not going to change the strategy department or anything, but he's going to give some balance to that stuff. I see that coming.
I don't think Lewis is allowed to take Bono.
There could be some of that. I read something about that as well, but I think he's going to try, and it looked like, and it feels like Bono's going to want to.
So let's recall that the reason Lewis is going there is for his long-term legacy. And that if we're going to talk about positives for Lewis, we're looking at not only a regulations change, but a power unit change. And if there's a team besides Mercedes to bet on and a new power unit regulation, it's probably going to be Ferrari. They have a little bit of experience and they've made some good engines in the past, I hear. So I think Lewis is really looking at 26, and I know he's not allowed to take people with the team. There are very strict agreements about it. But I'm sure at some point, those agreements run out, and the people that want to be with Lewis will migrate from Mercedes to Ferrari to help him out there. So I would really look at 26.
I don't want to be doom and gloom about Ferrari, but it's very clearly at the moment it's not going well, and it could be also. I know they're two very good and popular drivers, but it could be that you need a combination of the talents that Carlos Sainz and the talents of Charles Leclerc are bringing individually, but don't seem to have in one complete driver. And that could also improve if you have a Lewis Hamilton go in there as well. Okay, so that leads us on to McLaren. Now, obviously, as we know, McLaren have had the fastest car, without a doubt, for the last 8 races. And of course, Matt, they would have won today as well, had it not been for a bad strategy call. If there had been 10 more laps, Piastri would have passed them both.
If they'd kept Piastri on a one-stop, probably a win.
Yeah,
if they'd gotten ahead of Hamilton at the beginning, probably
if
a
Piastri
win.
hadn't tried to run over his engineer.
Those 3 things. If it wasn't just for those front jackman,
those 3 things,
probably a win.
Yeah, if everything had been significantly better and the car had been faster, they would have won. Clearly, McLaren have a good car, but I think, come on, I know they won it last week, but in such a competitive field, let's just put to bed one team has got this dominant car at the moment. It's obviously varying track to track.
It's very much a case of, I also think McLaren have forgotten how to win. Where it's that case of Ferrari and Red Bull and Mercedes have been winning for so long, they know what is needed to get a win out of the bag when maybe they don't deserve it, or maybe even just a clear win. They know what to do with it. McLaren, despite all their years of winning and being, I think, the second or third most winningest team of all time, they haven't won in a really long time. So this whole thing of being at the front is new to them. And I guess maybe they get the fear when they're at that sharp point of the race and things go wrong. We've seen 2 of their drivers in the last 2 races mess up their pit stops by running long. When was the last time you saw a front-running car run long in their pit stop? It doesn't really happen. It just tells me there is a lot of nerves going on there with McLaren at the moment, and they just need to get their act together.
Didn't Piastri do that a couple of races ago? I'm pretty convinced that's what it is. But I want to talk about McLaren, and I want to talk about strategy because we got all over them about their strategies. And if you look at Norris's race, granted, he had a terrible, terrible start. And that was pretty much entirely his own fault. But terrible start he got. Again. And here he is. He's behind Max Verstappen at Spa. And what is your bog standard strategy if you're close-ish to someone, but you can't get past them on track? You undercut them. Do they do this?
I thought you were going to say Verstappen.
No, they actually try to go long and wind up losing that place to Max. And having lost that place to Max, they once again find themselves, sorry for the laughter there, they once again find themselves behind and miss another undercut opportunity, or alternately, since they've already gone with the Piastri on the 2-stop preferred strategy, who might get a podium out of it, why not just leave him out on the 1-stop like Mercedes did with Russell? Seems to be a certain lack of creativity and flexibility right now about their strategy and their drivers, and they need to work it out if they want to win championships.
Because it seems like if you leave somebody out on a one-stop, they don't have enough weight left on their tyres and they get disqualified.
Yeah, there is that. But this isn't the first time they've tried to overcut and have a tyre advantage, and it's backfired on them. So there was a few races back, wasn't it, where they gave themselves a 6-lap tyre delta, but then you can't really cash in on that if you don't immediately catch up, which you by overcutting, you have a deficit to the cars in front. So I think today he left himself with 6 or 7 laps to catch up. Well, by the time you've caught up, you've sort of used up your tyre advantage delta anyway. And so they only overcut 1 lap on the next stint. So whatever the thinking is for this overcut strategy that they like doing, it hasn't been working.
No, it hasn't. And in the larger sense, unlike even Mercedes today, which showed itself willing to, I won't say that word, but to mess with Hamilton and just give an alternate strategy to a different driver to see what happens. I don't see the flexibility strategically from McLaren they're going to ultimately need if they want to take it to Red Bull and they want to take it to Mercedes. And Ferrari have like the random stochastic chaos strategy. So even to Ferrari, you're going to get some wins out of this. Yeah, and it's the one thing that's missing in their toolbox right now.
I think even McLaren was a bit surprised because no matter who you asked before this race, everyone was like, Verstappen winning? No, it's the McLarens. They're way ahead of everyone. Everyone has seen the numbers, but apparently the numbers lied.
Okay, so I think, firstly, I'll maintain what I've been saying for the last 8 or 9 races. I think people were just really happy to see not Red Bull be the fastest car, and I think they just jumped the gun by having this blanket, well, McLaren are going to be the most dominant car. And I'm not saying like you're stupid if you thought that, but we've also missed Mercedes slowly getting better in the background whilst Hamilton was underperforming. And now that Hamilton seems to have got his act together a little bit, then we see, okay, in Silverstone, it looked like a really, really good car. And then we see, okay, here, it looked like a good car and they were on top of it. Bit of luck with Verstappen having the engine penalty, but it was a good car. And we know in Austria, Hamilton had a bit of a mare. And I think that disguised the ultimate pace. So as much as Russell did his Hail Mary here, no disrespect to Russell, but he wasn't the key player in the Mercedes garage, this weekend. It was Lewis Hamilton's weekend, which is why I'm glad, sorry for Russell, but I'm glad the universe has been restored because
it's the right result, isn't it?
It's the right result. And he earned
based
that,
on what happened in this race.
Yeah, he earned that on merit. So if the people getting excited about McLaren being the best car, they're not ultra wrong. It's just that Red Bull still have an amazing car and Mercedes are sneaking up there. What I'm upset about is that when McLaren clearly didn't have the best car earlier in the year and towards the end of last year, they were being tactically amazing. And both their drivers, particularly Lando Norris, were being amazing. And now that they have got their teeth into a potential championship fight, particularly in the constructors, the strategy isn't clicking. Lando Norris can't seem to get off the line and into second gear. And actually, Piastri, for as well as he's been doing, and as well as he's been managing the tyres, he had an off today. He had an off in the last race as well. And he's not quite there for I know he won the race last time, but he did it. What are you missing, Vangeen?
When did Oscar have an off? Lando had an
under
off.
Overtaking. Oh, was that Norris?
No,
was it?
that was Lando behind Max.
Okay, well then
going to the bus stop.
He sent
and
his,
then Sainz had an off as well.
Okay, well he did send his front jackman into the shadow realm, which cost him.
He did send his front
like 4
jackman
seconds.
into the shadow
So what
realm.
I mean is like Mercedes and McLaren are making these mistakes now, whereas at the beginning of the season I was saying they are the best performing team regardless of the car.
There is orders of magnitude as well when you talk about the best car. So Red Bull had the best car by a country mile. There was a difference. McLaren might have the best car, but it might be the best car by 1/10.5.
Sure.
Which is very different to when Red Bull had the best car by 0.6. So there is orders of magnitude. We've now got the top 4 teams that are separated by not very much. The Red Bull might very well still be the best car of those 4 cars, but orders of magnitude.
Also, there's a reason why Nico Rosberg chose to simply just quit his career after he won the championship, because it's just a different ball game up there. When you're running P1, P2, P3, that's different from running P5, P7, P8. completely different ball game, and it requires some other strength. I think you can see Red Bull, you can see Mercedes. They are not used to it, but they are getting used to it, right?
Yeah. So I mean, even if you look at Norris with the run down the inside on Sainz, I think it was today, and then what could have been a great overtake to then advance, he ends up locking up, then they stay out, and then he's behind Verstappen, and apparently Morgan has corrected me that Piastri did have an off into the gravel, so he did have a bit of a sideways drive into the gravel, but as we know from Austria, that makes you go faster and lets you set a very, very hot lap there. So that's it's a bit of a disappointment that McLaren aren't quite the tight winning unit to take advantage of the car that they've got at the moment.
However, I'm going to ask the question, because it was such a controversy last week to let Piastri ahead. Oh, what if Norris loses the championship? But I'm looking at Norris today and I'm thinking maybe McLaren made the right bet on the team as a whole to catch Red Bull in the constructors, rather than betting that Norris could personally catch Max in the drivers.
No, because switching between Lando and Piastri last week would not have made the slightest bit of difference to the constructors. What it would have done is meant the fact that Lando has lost points to Max this weekend mean less. So it's actually made their decision last week look worse, because it's a case of when you have weekends when you finish behind Max, you've extended the buffer rather than reduced it.
But maybe Norris today showed us that he's not ready to take the fight all the way to Max.
Is that unfair?
That was my point. So
the problem is,
Piastri looked pretty good today and Norris, didn't.
Okay, so look, there's lots of stats being thrown around about Lando Norris, which is that he starts where he starts on pole. He can't convert that, and a lot of those times it has been through poor starts or through mistakes. And so there is a sort of upswell of people saying maybe he's not ready for that championship fight, but he's not a rookie, and I think there just might be a bit of disappointment if these kind of results keep racking up, because he's kind of, especially from the Brits, and I get accused of hating Norris and of having massive Brit bias, but he is a massive kind of British hope from the British fan base, and it doesn't quite seem to be clicking. So a little bit of disappointment there. Matt, where would you, before the awards, is there anywhere you'd like to take us?
The way it's been working out, there's only 2 midfield places worth fighting for, and that's 9th and 10th. Or I guess, actually, it would be 8th, 9th, and 10th now, because we had Russell disqualified. So that would be Alonso on the 1 stop, now P8, I think, with the disqualification. Ocon, despite losing 2 places to Norris's re-entry, and 9th now. And Ricciardo, I think, who he passed, or Albon, this is the one I got to look up real quick. Ricciardo, who he passed, will have claimed the last point. So that's your quick midfield roundup. But what I can tell you is every radio transcript I read that ran a 2-stop was really angry about it when they heard about the 1-stops.
And the interesting about Danny Ricciardo, Danny was very, very upset about losing out that point. So he will be very happy with George's disqualification, because he gets a point that he very much feels he deserved. So yeah, yay for Danny Rick, who very much looked like he is looking forward to a break. And yeah, hopefully he comes back rejuvenated and maybe in a slightly different Red Bull suit.
Every time someone puts down Ricciardo on this podcast, I'm going to just interfere with some factual information. As every Reddit comment starts, they should just... Ricciardo has been out racing Tsunoda for quite a while now. And he did
I'm the biggest Ricciardo fan on the show, just so you know. He's my cool. number 3
then
driver.
You're my friend, Alex.
Don't accuse me.
So you and me, Alex, we go against the other 2 guys, I'm just saying, I think it's a bad light he's been shown in Ricciardo for quite some time. I think it's unfair. He's doing a pretty good job, he is.
Okay. Well, Tsunoda was doing a pretty good job as well. So, if it swings and roundabouts, I don't think that Ricciardo is getting on top of Tsunoda in the way it looked like Tsunoda was getting on top of Ricciardo earlier in the season. To me, it kind of feels like, there's a little bit of parity. That's enough. That's the excuse. Dump Tsunoda, Ricciardo into Red Bull.
one more thing to mention, and I might have mentioned it earlier, but for those teams where people took a power unit or an internal combustion unit here, look for their teammates to take one at Monza. Just a suggestion, nothing confirmed yet.
I want to add just a small thing about Tsunoda. He said something in an interview which I can't really fathom how to understand this, but he said, they can play around on the contract. My contract is almost worthless. I didn't read my contract properly. Whatever it says, I think I will end up with this team. I think that is just such a weird thing to say in an interview.
Okay, but just to clarify, Tsunoda did have a 60-place grid penalty today, which, interestingly, he didn't know. So a reporter told him, and he said, oh, my goodness, I didn't know that. So, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So just to note, for the results today, because I know people wanted us to justify Ricciardo's position last week, Tsunoda was from the back of the grid this week. All right, let's move on to the podium. I think that was a thrilling and exciting Belgian Grand Prix where we saw the world-famous Spa-Francorchamps transformed from a track where people could breeze by into a track where actually being in clean air meant that you could defend, and where we had a really surprising change of tyre strategy, probably based on the new track surface. So Formula One is a surprising and evolving game, and in a way, obviously I'm happy that Lewis Hamilton ends up winning, but in a way, it's a shame that that brave strategy from George Russell, feeling through the seat of his pants that his tyres would survive when everybody else pitted. It's a shame that that wasn't rewarded. So let's move on to our awards. We're going to start with the negative thing so we can end being positive. So this is the Missed Apex Award.
Oh no, you missed the apex.
And let's start with Alex Vangeen. And I know, Alex, that you would like to dedicate this show to a special person in your life.
Yeah, my brother has a colleague that he's working with who's having a very hard time of life at the moment, but he's a massive F1 fan and a fan of the show.
What's his name?
His name is Gareth Drew, and he would just like a bit of a shout out just because he's having a bad time, and we wish him well.
Well, hello, Gareth Drew. Hopefully, Alex has converted you to being a Missed Apex podcast fan, and that is making things not significantly worse in your life. But Alex, who missed the apex for you?
I've got a few, but I'm going to go for comedy relief, and I'm going to say Perez, because he started on the front row of the grid today, and he couldn't do anything with it. And out of the 4 top cars in the sport, he finished last. I know it was ended up being 45 seconds behind, but he did stop to go and get tyres to get the last lap, so it was still more like 20 seconds behind. And I am very much hoping Red Bull have gone, right, enough is enough, and they stick Lawson or Danny Ricciardo in for the next race after the summer break, because the Perez experiment has not worked and it needs to end. I'm sorry, Spanners.
So in about 10, 15 years, there's going to be a book, Bird on the Perch, yeah? Because they call it the Pratt Perch, don't they? And it's going to be Hugh Bird with his tell-all book, autobiography about his time at Red Bull, where it will confirm what I've been saying, which is that it's not the same car. It's all been a massive stitch up. And then I'll go, I told you so, Alex. And you'll go, yeah, I know. Yeah, it was obvious at the time. So I'm already anticipating a betrayal.
We had a very similar thing in Mark Webber's book, and no one believes him either.
No, I know. But there will be a book, I'm sure of it. Matt, Trumpets, you also have news and information.
I do. I can pre-announce my wife's book launch event as being the evening of September 12th, which is a Thursday, and in Brooklyn. So if you are in the audience and that is a thing you're interested, that's romancy books about racing car drivers, then we will provide you with further details soon enough, and you're welcome to come check it out and say hi.
Can I get a signed copy? Is that?
Yes, you can.
Oh, yeah, that sounds great. What's the book called?
Is it,
Matthew.
it's the Reckless Heart series. Is it Fast and Reckless? Reckless and Fast?
Fast and Reckless. Well, the link will definitely be in the show notes below. And I don't know if this hurts or hinders or helps, but obviously the romantic characters are going to be inspired by Matt Trumpets himself, because it's his wife's book. So, Matt, who missed the apex for you?
I have to add with a very hefty dollop of imagination if you've ever met me in real life.
No.
This is one of these where I have two entirely different choices, but who missed the apex for me, and it's because it was all but done, is I think Sainz. I would have loved to see Sainz pull off that one stopper, but picking the medium tire at the start absolutely missed the apex. It made it impossible, although it probably also kept him from being disqualified. So, watching the end.
There's that. And also Kristian Pederson. Kristian, have you got to announce that you're going to be making a return to music television? Perhaps a return to the coasts of Ibiza to be a DJ this summer? No news?
I love when you stereotype me. Either I'm on TV in Denmark or I'm DJing at
International superstar DJ.
That is the only two options. Okay.
Or to be fair, Kristian does sometimes do like penguin documentaries in the North Pole and stuff like that. And you know when you see that one penguin and it's like, no one can save this penguin. There's nothing I can do. It doesn't matter what I do. You could save the penguin, Kristian. You could.
I actually used to be the voice of National Geographic and Discovery in Denmark.
I know. I watch. So who missed the apex for you, Kristian?
I think it was a weekend where we just saw basically pretty good racing all over the board. Some missed some minor apexes. So I'm going to pick something not from the race, which I think is Formula One, who missed a golden opportunity to actually change some of the things that is supposed to be. It will make the sport better from my point of view. That is one, they have chosen not to go forward with a new points. So everyone outside top 10 will still not get any points. I think that is a great missed opportunity from a commercial and from a media point of view. It's all down to lawyers and money and stuff like that, which has nothing to do with the media circus. Anyway, also, they went plus 2 kilos for extra fuel, so the cars will be 800 kilos now. That is also the wrong way. They should be 700 kilos.
I think that was for big-boned drivers, not for extra fuel.
Yeah, but still, it was to put 2 kilos on the driver, but they should extract that from somewhere else.
No, I think if you choose big 'un drivers like Haas have done, they've got Behrman and Ocon, both 8 foot tall. If you're going to do that and you're going to betray motorsport by picking basketball players, then I think that's your fault and you shouldn't get.
But the thing is, though, they could be like 6 foot each, right? But they are thinner than a straw. I think they weigh less than the other guys up there.
Well, anyway, may they all hit their heads on things that they thought they would easily be able to walk under. So I will give my Missed Apex award. I had a couple in my head. So I think Red Bull actually underestimated the opposition maybe when they said, well, you know, we'll have a 10-place grid penalty here. And it was damage limitation, but I think they would have been expecting a bit more than that. If it turns out they aren't using the new engine, or they didn't use the new engine, then that would count as missing the apex. But really, it's got to go down to whoever's in charge of the weight of the Mercedes, because you kind of threw away a 1-2. And that is something where you choose at various points to bake in tolerance. So if you had a bit of tolerance today, yes, you might have dropped back behind Piastri, but that would have been a double podium. So that's a sporting fail. Someone made the decision at some point of what tolerance they'd have. And, you know, this time it didn't work out.
It was someone's responsibility to go, right, George is going to be out for twice as long on a set of tyres.
He's got a fuel save.
He's got to fuel save. We have to tell George to fuel save. So unless it comes out that they screamed at George to fuel save and he didn't, then that's on George. But as far as I'm concerned, that is a team miss. But I don't think Matt agrees.
And I'll just say, though, quickly, that if they had have told him to fuel save, obviously he wouldn't have been able to defend against Hamilton. So if there's any kind of charge...
Weight is not fuel related.
They drain the car before they weigh it. They drain the car before they weigh it. That's what I found in the regulations.
But to pass that test, they would have had more fuel on board. That's the only option they had for not burning through weight. Yes, it is. Yes,
Well,
it is.
no, they drain all of the fuel before they weigh the car. So having extra fuel would have been irrelevant. They have to drain the car before they
So
weigh it.
fuel isn't included in your final weight?
No, the only reason you have to have fuel left is for a sample, and that is, I think, around a kilo. That is not has nothing to do with weight. Minimum weight is before fuel.
So you can't fuel
massive-
save to keep your minimum weight up? Okay.
No, you have to save. You put less fuel in than you need for the entire race on maximum, because then you have to adjust it. But you could basically just fill the car to the rim with fuel and go full out, I think. But that would weigh more than the other cars at start then.
So it's still that in that case, it is definitely on somebody at Mercedes to say, George, I'm sorry, we can't do a one stop because
We
it
have
won't
no
work
tolerance for that.
We have no tolerance for that.
And it could be as simple as saying, without the end lap picking up rubber, that is where it went wrong. And if they just missed that line on the Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, I mean, and you have to think about all these things in like 35 seconds and deal with them. So it's like, I can understand why it got missed, but yeah, it got missed.
Well, the Missed Apex Award isn't always like a hang them. It's just, well, you did a thing that didn't work out today. So that's the Missed Apex.
Somebody messed up. Doesn't matter how big or how small it was. Someone messed up and you can call that.
And now we get to end on the positive thing. But firstly, let me thank our patrons. And we've had an influx of new patrons again. This late into a season is quite rare for us. So I am so grateful for our new patrons and the patrons that have stayed. Generally, people assign, a value to it. And we just really have one tier that is included in, every perk we do, which is an ad-free feed, extra content when we can. We're a performing arts family, so summer is very difficult for extra content. But also, you get notified of any events first, and you get the satisfaction of helping us be up in the charts with the big kids. So in the US episode charts after the last race review, we were the 38th sports podcast episode available in the United States and the 44th in the UK. And we are able to do all those things because of our patrons. You give us the time, space, and energy to be able to go and do that. Patreon.com/Missed Apex. If you think we provide value to you and you want to help support us, $5 a month is our most common tier. And we also have the Discord live chat, which is a fantastic place to be. That runs around the clock, not just during the race. Okay, so now we're going to do the positive thing. Well, I'm going to give my thing of the weekend award to Matt, actually, because we had all this information flying at us as the live stream started. And not only were you able to, after a brief fit of rage before we started the live stream, not only were you able to disseminate all that information, but you were also able to put it into context for us and teach us about the tyre pickup rules. And I learned the new thing just now about the fuel and stuff. So, Matt, you're my thing of the weekend.
Aw, I appreciate
Awesome.
that. And that makes you my thing of the weekend for having faith that I
Yay.
could actually pull this ridiculous
Also, you might be wrong.
thing off.
So if the YouTube comments are like, no, he was wrong about all of that, I'll take
you know
that.
what?
Yeah.
I have a beef with those YouTube commenters
About the
because
Ricardo
they
thing.
are wrong. I know I was
YouTube?
absolutely right about my tire information, and whatever they thought I said, I did not.
Okay, that was about Ricardo last week. But who, Matt, is your thing of the weekend this week? Go and follow Matt on Twitter, by the way, at MattPT55.
Right. So this is a tough one. I have a dual thing of the weekend. One of them is Russell for pulling off the tire management. But I
Sure.
think my big one really here, and Mercedes for letting him do it. Oh, man. Geez, there's so many things now that are coming to me. I should have thought about this before the show. I'm going to go with Piastri, though. He's my real thing of the weekend. We have been dogging him about his tire management. And the result in Hungary, where I think McLaren really genuinely expected him to be like a second behind Norris so they could say, let him pass, and it wouldn't be the kerfuffle that it turned into. Didn't happen. But today, he absolutely showed up and he absolutely represented. He did a great job at the start. He was super aggressive. He had a very fast lap. And aside from, playing pickup sticks with his front jackman, it was every bit of he really starting to look like he's on top of this car. And I think he might have more of a champion temperament than maybe even Norris does.
Excellent. Well, we go to Alex, and you should follow Alex on social media as well by searching for Alex Vangeen, Vangeen, and search that in YouTube as well, because he intermittently puts out okay content.
There will be a video out after next weekend, because me and Brad are off karting again.
Hooray!
Yay, after the summer break, so we're excited about that. No, my thing of the weekend is the competitiveness in Formula One at the moment. To have 4 teams where any driver, except one of them, can win a race or be on the podium is just absolutely brilliant at the moment, because none of us predicted that at the end of last season when Max basically won the whole title on his own, both titles on his own. And then when Max started off strong this season, it was like, oh God, we're going to have another season of this. But now F1 is just so great again. And I'm excited for every single weekend to start, because you don't know who's going to win. And that's what it's all about.
You won't find Kristian Pederson on social media because he's too busy shilling for Danish bacon. But I can ask you, what was your thing of the weekend, Kristian?
If you want to have me on social media, you have to be a patron to the Mr.
And he's there in the Discord,
because then you can do whatever you want, as a lot of the patrons already do, sending pictures and recipes for good food, Mexican and stuff like that. But a lot of bacon in there. Loads. Anyway, I was going to say the same thing as Alex.
Wait, did you say bacon?
I said bacon, yeah. Confirmed. Yeah. Bacon confirmed. Alex is spot on. We today we had a race, no crashes. Lots of DRS trains, yet we had the most amazing race just from pure racing and strategies and stuff. And I think Formula One is a very good place right now, and we shouldn't get complacent as viewers and just be like, I want more. We should celebrate it when it's there. I'll add one thing, which is my original winner for this category, which is, I've heard talks about an international IOC karting event, which would make karting a part of the Olympics.
Yes.
And we have something called the World Games, which is basically where you qualify strange, weird new sports, which can then qualify to become part of the Olympics. And I'd say get the 40 best racing drivers in the world, make them go kart racing at the Olympic ceremony. I will watch the Olympics for the first time in my life.
I disagree. It should not be the top 40 in the world.
I'm driving in a tunnel now, so
No. You should have the karting, I agree, but it shouldn't be the best 40 karters in the world. It should be the representatives of various nations, because I do qualify for a far-off land that I don't think has very good karters.
Nice.
And there's an outside chance that I will go for that, but it will be I'll be 51. So,
but tell me, Spanish, and the rest of you, who should be the one participating for the UK?
Alex, of course, it should be Alex. Last question,
Alex
Kristian.
Albon, okay, Alex Albon.
Vangeen. Last question: crispy, streaky bacon, or kind of just cooked tender bacon?
I'm sort of in the middle, but rather overcooked than. I need some of the real stuff still there. It can't be completely brown, black. But I mean, it's bacon. I'll eat it all.
Yeah, we've covered all the important topics. So
great stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I want to share that positivity as well about Formula One. I think we have the right to complain when it's not delivering what we want, and there's low hanging fruit and obvious reasons. But when the sport is in a peachy state like it is now, and I think likely to be for the next year and a half, at least up to the next regulation set, Kristian's absolutely right. We should bathe in it, acknowledge it, and enjoy it, because we've got half a season at least of this left. So we are taking now our summer break, in that we will reduce down to just one show a week. But we will be here Sunday with a mid-season review of the lower half of the grid, and then we'll go to the upper half. Hopefully we'll get some tech time over the summer. You'll have some substitute hosts, because I am going off on a summer vacation as well. But wherever we see you next, work hard, be kind, and have fun. This was Missed Apex Podcast. See how I could barely get myself to say substitute host? I don't want to give up the chair. But I do have to go on holiday. It won't be as good. I'm the best one.
You keep telling yourself that.
Keep telling everyone that. If I say it enough.